Clemson is pissed off just in time to welcome Syracuse to Death Valley. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into this Locked On crossover edition. I'm Jackson Holzer, the host of Locked On Syracuse. That's Morgan Thomas, the host of Locked On Clemson Tigers. And on today's show, we are previewing this upcoming matchup on Saturday in Death Valley at noon Eastern. Syracuse, a 17.5-point underdog to a Clemson team, national title aspirations heading into the year, now suddenly sitting at 1-2. We'll give our game predictions, matchups to look out for, and big picture thoughts on each of each other's seasons thus far. All that and more here on this Locked On crossover edition. And before we get to this edition of Locked On Syracuse and Locked On Clemson, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. So, Morgan, we were talking off air a little bit right before we started recording this. I feel like this is a game that neither of us want to see happen. So, Morgan, I'll start with you right now. What has gone wrong with Clemson?
Well, there's a lot of little things. If you've listened to Dabo Swinney, you can kind of tell it's not just one big thing that they can just easily fix. And we still have a lot of hope that they can fix it. But as you remember, the LSU matchup, Clemson seemed to not really know what to do in the second half. They couldn't run the ball. They didn't even try to run the ball. And then against Troy, they also came out slow again. And then most recently against Georgia Tech, they came out slow again. So the first half has been a nightmare for Clemson. They can't seem to get the scripted plays together. But it all starts really for me with not just one player, but it starts with Cade Klubnik. He's not played the way we expected. He's not been the Heisman Trophy kind of candidate or front runner that many people thought he would be. He's a senior now, and he's been a big disappointment. He's went back to what you would probably have remembered when he was a sophomore, not staying in the pocket, not keeping his feet settled, scrambling when he doesn't need to scramble, and staring down wide receivers. So he's just not playing like somebody who wants to get drafted in the NFL. I mean, that's for real. But, on the defensive side of the ball, they also have struggled here and there, not living up to expectations on the defensive line. We have a lot of big names at Clemson. And I remember when you and I were on the ACC squad show, and I was joking that I really felt like Clemson's biggest question mark was the punter. And you were pretty upset with me about that one and thought there got to be more than that, right? Well, come to find out, there was more than that. And actually, the punter has been doing great. So, applauds to the punter out there. Thank you so much for actually being Mr. Consistency for us, because the rest of the team has really not lived up to expectations, whether it be the offense and the quarterback or the defensive line. Just really kind of been a lackluster start to the season.
When I look at Clemson right now, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with Cade Klubnik. I don't think it really starts with him. I think he is most of the problem with Clemson right now, because even though Clemson's defense has some concerns and they have not been perfect, I brought this up, and you guys will hear this in the ACC squad episode that's coming out on Thursday. I mentioned how if you told any of us before the season that Clemson was going to hold LSU to 17 points, and when they were going to hold Georgia Tech to 24, most, if not all of us, would have said they're going 2-0, or at minimum, they're going 1-1. So if you're relying on your defense, which is supposed to be an excellent defense, to be perfect, then all of a sudden you start running into problems. Then all of a sudden, every little mistake that the defense makes gets magnified because you don't have an offense right now that seems to be clicking, an offense that can bail out a defense when they make a mistake. Fortunately, Morgan, You have Syracuse coming in. Syracuse is 2-1, so that's good.
Okay.
They got their own problems on defense. So, Morgan, this feels like almost the perfect time for Clemson to turn their season around and get some confidence on offense, right?
I think that if you look at what Syracuse did against UConn, you're thinking, I'm going to take the 17.5 and we're going to win this game because it's at home. And Clemson should have more talent than a UConn team. But then when you are a Clemson fan, at this point, you're extremely jaded. And now after Dabo Swinney came out and kind of grandstanded a little bit about his resume and all the things he's done in his career, there's more of that bitter taste, not to a point where you're trying to have another coach or anything, but just a bitter taste of, we don't want to hear what happened in 2010 or 2014. We want to know what you're doing right now in 2025 and what you're going to do in 2026. So right now, the here and now is the biggest question mark for Clemson. Syracuse is great because it's a home game. They have a bye week next week. So really it's the last game of September for Clemson. And again, when you look at the antidote or what the blueprint, if you will, of what UConn did, to me, you got to get your speedsters to the outside. And that would be what they did. That's what I would do if I'm Clemson. They have some guys that they can do that as well. And really, Syracuse didn't win the game until like 45 seconds to go. So there's a lot of hope there that you would be able to cover the spread of the 17.5 as last time I looked. But again, can you really trust your gut and that hope and really take that with a Clemson team that struggles to get to 21 points? I mean, Clemson struggles to get to 21. Does that mean they have to keep Syracuse to 0? I don't know. That would be very, very difficult. I am concerned about Syracuse's offense, but to me, this does set up as if maybe this is maybe a rebound game, but also maybe one of those smoke and mirror games where if you do good, then you think you fixed it and you really haven't.
You are pretty much right about that. You know what's also funny about this, Morgan? I'm sure you're aware of this. Syracuse and Clemson have a very weird recent history. We all know about the upset in 2017. Mm-hmm. But what people may not remember is all the other times that Syracuse has kept it very close with Clemson, only to lose at the very end. Talking 2018, 2019 was a blowout. But then you also have 2020. A Syracuse team, that was when Clemson was at the peak of their powers with Trevor Lawrence and everyone still there. Syracuse was a 1-win team that year and were within a touchdown late in the third quarter. Doesn't make any sort of sense, right? 2021, 3-point game. And I don't want to talk about 2022. Can we not talk about that one and how that one ended?
Yeah, we'll forget that one.
That was a Cade Klubnik's quote unquote coming out party. For those that don't remember here. But Syracuse and Clemson, it is a fascinating matchup because, and we'll get more into it in the next segment here. You look at Clemson top to bottom, you look at Syracuse top to bottom. And if you're a Syracuse fan like myself, I don't like any of the matchups really. But you have Clemson, who is probably pissed off with the fact that they're 1-2, but they're also 1-2, and they have underachieved so far. So it's a matter of, are they going to figure it out? And how long will it continue? Because if it continues, that opens the door for a Syracuse upset. But I look at it and say, if Clemson plays up to its potential, like we thought they would in the preseason, they should easily cover 17.5 points, right?
You would think. You would think. But it is one of those games where, I mean, to me, though, I have utmost respect for Fran Brown and the fact that he had his men doing suicides after not performing well, and I think that's what scares me a little bit, is that Fran Brown is in a lot of ways just like Georgia Tech, where this is a game that he can ultimately focus on. Clemson now, while they may be angry, and I struggle to see that. The fan base maybe has been showing that, but the players, I haven't seen it as much. But to me, Clemson is still now at the point where there's a lot of stress because there's 9 games to go and you can't really lose anymore.
Yep. And coming up, we'll talk about the matchups of this game. Some maybe positive ones for Syracuse, negative ones for Syracuse, and same with Clemson. Positive matchups and negative matchups. All that and more coming up on this crossover edition of Locked On Syracuse and Locked On Clemson. Stick with us. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings this same intention to how we craft every model. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it all down. Now, unfortunately for the Clemson Tigers, they lost to Georgia Tech, so we're going to talk about Syracuse here and their victory versus Colgate. And how about Steve Angeli, over 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. He's certainly delivered for Syracuse. And DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday you order. Stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. It's a Locked On crossover edition. Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer. Locked On Clemson with Morgan Thomas. We went over some question marks and some storylines heading into this game. Now let's get into the matchups here. And Morgan, when you look across the board, what matchup are you looking forward to most in this, and which one are you looking forward to the least?
The matchup most, I would say, would be the Clemson defensive line. I want to see Clemson's defensive line really get to the quarterback. You can't let Steve Angeli sit back there and just pick you apart, because you do have a lot of stars out there that he can throw to. 2 wide receivers that could kill you at any moment, and then a tight end that really, I mean, you just got to, he's going to convert a third down. He's going to keep the chain moving. So you do have a lot of weapons in the passing game. But what I've noticed is that there's gaps here and there where you can allow the quarterback to get sacked. I believe you've had multiple sacks per game so far. Clemson has been struggling to really be consistent with that. And that's been the biggest frustration is, man, where has this big defensive line been? And it really gives you that appreciation for what they used to have with the Christian Wilkins and the Dexter Lawrence and the Cleveland Furl and the Austin Bryant. Those guys all went to the NFL. Most of them were first-round draft picks, and you thought that you would just keep replenishing them. And Clemson does have 5-star guys, but they're just not bringing that 5-star pressure. And so there's a big concern of why that is. Maybe this Syracuse game is one of those games where they can get into the backfield, get a couple of sacks on their the box score, and regain some of that confidence and figure out how they're going to work together more. So that's the biggest matchup that I want to see the most success in. The one that I'm worried about the most, well, I think you've got to say it's got to be what's Cade Klubnik really going to do? You know, because as you saw against Georgia Tech, as we've seen against South Carolina, at Duke in the very past, he can go off the rails and throw a couple of turnovers, throw a couple of interceptions. And as we've seen, if you get behind on the turnover margin, well, this team's not proven to kind of beat you by scoring more points than you. So that would be a big concern to me, is the not protecting the football again.
Totally valid there. And I think one of those points that you brought up, which is Clemson's D-line, is actually the matchup that I am least looking forward to right now, because I know that they've so far underachieved. TJ Parker, projected first-round pick, 1 tackle for loss through 3 games. That is not acceptable. It actually makes me a little bit upset, because I want the ACC to do well, and this guy's not performing. Doesn't make any sort of sense. But I look at Syracuse's offensive line right now. They've had a lot of mistakes in the first 3 games, and it's not just about they lose their man on a pass rush. How many times for Syracuse, and Syracuse fans are well aware of this, have they allowed free rushers in on Steve Angeli. And I've made this point so many times on the podcast that free rushers just come down to miscommunication. It's not about the other team. Okay, TJ Parker, I know he's underachieved so far. Let him beat one of our tackles one-on-one. Let him do that. If he does that and he beats one of our tackles, so be it. You don't need to give him a free rush on Steve Angeli. And that has happened too many times for Syracuse this season. And on top of that, they are a little bit beat up along the offensive line. We're still waiting for the injury report at the time of this recording, so we'll see about the statuses of some of the players along the offensive line. Demetrius Weatherspoon, Trevion Mack. Those are big questions as to whether or not they're going to play. And if they're not going to play, well, now all of a sudden you're talking about backups against this Clemson defensive line. That being said, a matchup that I'm kind of looking forward to, you mentioned Cade Klubnik. Very curious to see what this Syracuse secondary can do against Clemson's wide receivers. Is Antonio Williams going to play, or is he going to be out for another game here? Are they going to hold him through the bye? Because I know it's a hamstring.
The assumption is that he'll be held through the bye.
So in that case, Clemson, look, I get the talent, everything's across the board, but right now, they got one guy who's really producing on the outside, and that's Wesco. He's like the one guy right now that you're looking at saying, well, he's doing his job. So if I'm the Syracuse secondary, can you take advantage of the fact that as of right now with Clemson, they got one guy on the outside that's producing? Part of it is probably on Cade Klubnik as well, and he's not doing his job. But also, receivers are not getting open, tight ends. Where's the running game for Clemson right now? I guess Adam Randall's been pretty good for the last couple of weeks. But I want to see this Syracuse secondary do work against these Clemson wide receivers, because I think if they can hold them down, maybe aside from Wesco, assuming Antonio Williams is not going to play, if you can hang with Clemson in their town on the outside, you can probably hang with anyone in the country.
The problem is that it's not that they're not open. It's just that Cade Klubnik's not seeing them. You know, you can't really fully get the idea of what's going on when you watch the television broadcast. It's hard to get the all 22. You know, you have to basically be born into the exclusive network to get into the all 22. But when you go to the game, especially like me, and you're up in the nosebleeds and you're watching it, you can see a lot of things happening and guys getting open. And Cade comes off of his reads too quickly, where they get open immediately after he scrambles, or Cade doesn't give doesn't give a progression enough time. And so he'll go from 1 to 2 to 3. Well, then one of those guys gets open. And then a lot of times Cade will pick a wide receiver pre-snap. Nobody wants to admit that on the coaching staff, but it's beyond obvious that he will pick who he wants to throw to, regardless of what the defense is doing at all, regardless of the numbers or anything. So that is a big concern, is not just that they're getting open. They are getting open. It's just him being able to see them. And that's what limits you, because you have, before it was Antonio Williams and then not a lot of other people. Now it's morphed into Bryant Wesco and not a lot of other people. That was what the biggest concern for me after Georgia Tech was. You look at that game, Georgia Tech is, to me, not one that would be a marquee passing team in the country. But they had more passing yards than Clemson and used 5 guys 4 or 5 times. To me, like they showed they were a better passing team than Clemson, and they're not even really a passing team. So
no, they're
that's
a running
the concern
team
for me.
They're a big, big running team. And with Cade Klubnik, here's what could help him out here. I mentioned the problems with Syracuse's offensive line. Syracuse, through 3 games right now, they have one guy along their defensive line that has a sack. And they have 3 sacks total on the season. So that means 2 of their sacks are coming from guys who are not along the defensive line for Syracuse. They're not getting a lot of pressure on the quarterback. And when they have occasionally gotten pressure, it's not from guys who you would expect should be the ones delivering the pressure. One of the sacks came from someone who is converting from tight end to linebacker, and that's Jamie Tremble. He did that against Colgate, of all teams, right? I mean, like, no disrespect, but that's Colgate. Clemson is a little bit of a different animal here, right? The other one came from a defensive back. So Cade Klubnik should have, as of right now, based on what I'm seeing from Syracuse, he should have all day to be able to make decisions. I mean, he should be able to drop back, have a cup of coffee, set out a nice little table to have a little picnic, and then try to find his receiver that is open because, look, I like Syracuse's corners. I like Demetrius Samuel as a true freshman, even though he's 17. Clemson is definitely going to be picking on him at times. I like Chris Peele. He's performed well as well. You can't expect them to cover for that long. You just can't. I don't care who's the corner there. I don't care if you got Deion Sanders back there. It's not easy asking corners and safeties to cover for 6-7 seconds if you can't get any sort of pressure on the quarterback. Eventually, receivers come open, and eventually the quarterback, it's Cade Klubnik after all, unless he forgot how to play football, he's going to have all day to be able to make throws. That being said, if he did forget to play football, well, anything could happen, right? Anything could happen in this game. That's what makes it very, very fascinating. That's why I don't think either of us right now want to see this game happen, because on paper, we'll talk about in game predictions, Clemson should pretty much win this game easily, but they're just not performing and they're not clicking right now. When is it going to click for the Clemson Tigers? And hey, feel free to chime in the comments section below right now. What's going on with Clemson? And are they going to figure it out for Syracuse on Saturday? Or is Syracuse going to take advantage of the fact that Clemson appears to be pretty off right now, particularly on offense? Now, coming up, Morgan and I will give our game predictions. So stick with us here on Locked On Syracuse and Locked On Clemson. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege. This is a Locked On crossover edition. I'm Jackson Holzer, the host of Locked On Syracuse. That's Morgan Thomas, the host of Locked On Clemson Tigers. We are getting you set and ready to go for Syracuse and Clemson Saturday in Death Valley at noon Eastern. We've gone over some of the questions for either team, some of the matchups that we're looking forward to seeing in this game. Now let's give our predictions. And before we lock in official scores here, let's play a little fill in the blank game, okay? So I'm going to make a statement, and then Morgan, you're going to fill in the blank with what you think, okay?
All right.
Clemson wins this game if
Clemson wins this game if they can get pressure to Steve Angeli. To me, that's number one, is just get back in the backfield. As you mentioned, the free rushers. It's scary because he will take a hit. He's not the biggest dude out there. He's not a Tim Tebow, and he will take a hit. And I love how he stays in the pocket. But if I'm Clemson's defensive front, I'm thinking it's time to get in that backfield, get dirty, and get a couple of sacks on that scoreboard or on that box score, and really, really put some pressure and show what you can do on this defensive front.
I will not go with the opposite and say, hey, Syracuse wins if they protect Steve Angeli, because I feel like that's cheating a little bit.
Okay.
Although that is a big key for Syracuse, keeping Steve Angeli upright with this passing attack. Take your chances with the Clemson secondary, not their defensive line. So I'll say this. Syracuse wins this game if Cade Klubnik keeps playing like the way he's playing. How about that? I don't know if they're going to be able to generate any sort of pass rush regardless, because so far through 3 games, I could sit here and wish and hope that they can generate a pass rush, but so far Syracuse has not been able to do that. So at that point, you're at the mercy of how the other team's quarterback is going to play, which is how I ended the last segment, which is if Cade Klubnik is still playing like the way he's playing, which is a 59% completion percentage, barely over 200 yards per game, and a 1-to-1 touchdown interception ratio right now, that opens the door for a Syracuse upset. I like how Adam Randall has performed so far for Clemson. I don't believe he is the next Phil Maffa right now, or the next Travis Etienne, or all the other great players that Clemson has had in the backfield so far. Wesco has performed really well, but Wesco is just a great player. He's a great player. If Cade Klubnik is off, who else on the outside is going to be able to do anything other than Bryant Wesco? I don't know. So Syracuse wins this game if Cade Klubnik continues to disappoint us all this season and not perform to how we thought he was going to perform in the preseason. So, Morgan, I'll leave it with this, all right? Let's get right to it. What's your prediction for this game?
I still feel like that Clemson will probably start out slow. I'll be very shocked if they are winning in the first quarter. To me, it would set up to be just like it's always been, where they just can't figure it out in the first half, in the first quarter. So I would not be shocked if Syracuse isn't up 10-0 going into halftime, or at least tied at halftime. I do believe that Clemson will win this game. I would not take plus or minus the 17.5. I would pick Syracuse with the spread for sure. I think it'll be closer than that. So to me, I would say this is the time where Clemson finally gets up into the 30s. They might could get maybe, 31, 30, something like that. And then Syracuse, I think, will be close to more around the 21 mark there. So to me, maybe a 10-point win with it being 30-20 something. That's what I'll go with.
Got it. So I'm the host of Locked On Syracuse. And I would love to pick Syracuse to win. I would love it. I think it would be hilarious if I go on here and I pick Syracuse to win.
You
and
should.
Then they actually win. I mean, I should, right? I am the host of Locked On Syracuse. I should always pick this team to win, but
always,
right? I hate this matchup so much. I hate it because Clemson is just not playing well right now, but I still respect them so much. And I still look at them and I say, so much talent. They're right there. I don't think this is a Florida State from last year's situation with them. Because with Florida State and what happened with them last year, similarly, they lost to Georgia Tech on a walk-off field goal. But then they lost to Boston College at home. And then they lost to Memphis at home. I look at Clemson, and Fran Brown said it in the press conference. They're a couple of plays away from being 3-0 right now, and maybe they're not perfect, but we'd be looking at them entirely differently. In fact, if they're 3-0 right now, they're top 5 still in the AP poll, even if they're not perfect. I think it's a bad matchup for Syracuse. The only hope there's two hopes, which is Cade Klubnik remains off, and Syracuse's weird recent history versus Clemson where they just keep it close, even though it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I think Syracuse in this game is going to make too many mistakes that are going to come and bite them. So I'm going to pick the Clemson Tigers, even though I'm the host of Locked On Syracuse. I have to be honest with myself and honest with you all. I am picking Clemson to win this game 27-14. How about that? I think it could be relatively close in the second half, but I just think Clemson's too much along both fronts for Syracuse to be able to compete in this one for 4 full quarters, which is what they're going to need to do in order to win this game. Any last thoughts, Morgan?
I think, like you said, there is a scenario and there's an avenue where they could win. To me, if I'm Syracuse, and I will play devil's advocate there for both of us because we both pick Clemson, but I would say Fran Brown is going to bring his guys ready to play. He's a no-nonsense head coach, and he's got fire. I love that. I love that about the Georgia Tech head coach. And so to me, when you have that kind of focus and intensity, the players want to run through a wall for you. And so I do worry about that. And then again, if you can just give Angeli time to pick apart Clemson's secondary, he can do so. He can do so with the tight end, and then he can hit you for a big play with the outside wide receivers. And really, Clemson's fan base is on super edge. So if I'm Fran Brown, I said, hey, all we need to do is to highlight make them screw up, make them make a big mistake, and the fan base is going to start booing them. And do you really trust Cade Klubnik to hang after the fan base is booing him again? It's going to be a struggle there if you get your home crowd against you again. They have been booing a little bit this past game against Troy, and it could come back again if they start out lethargic. So if I'm Fran Brown, there are a few things that definitely have to go your way, but there's an avenue there, and they do have an offense that you should respect for sure.
To sum it up best, I think Fran Brown's going to have them ready, and I don't think they're going to be scared of the moment. Like when Syracuse lost to Tennessee in week 1, and it was a 19-point margin defeat, I didn't think Syracuse was scared of the moment. I thought they got off to a poor start. It was a little bit unlucky at times, especially in the beginning. Got also a little bit lucky as well with a fumble in the red zone, but that's neither here nor there. But I think it was a scenario where Syracuse simply was not playing up to par, and Tennessee's a great team, and so they capitalized on that fact. It was not one of those things where I looked at it and said, man, Syracuse, they look like they're lost. They don't look prepared at all. They look intimidated by the moment. So I don't think Syracuse is going into Death Valley on Saturday and they're going to be scared. Because it's Fran Brown and he has changed the mentality of the program. But I just look along the fronts of these teams and I'm like, if Clemson can't figure it out now against the Syracuse front, both sides of the ball, where they can't generate a pass rush and they have too many miscommunications along the offensive line as of right now, it's not a good matchup for Syracuse on paper. I don't think they're going to be scared of the moment, but I'm still picking Clemson to win this game 27-14. I'm Jackson Holzer, the host of Locked On Syracuse. That's Morgan Thomas, the host of Locked On Clemson. Thank you all so much for watching and listening to this Locked On crossover edition. And hey, if you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit that subscribe button. It helps both our channels grow to reach both of the amazing fan bases, the Syracuse fan base, the Clemson fan base. And hey, we can't wait for this game on Saturday between Syracuse and Clemson. Take care, everyone.